Hello, nerds! Who do we have back on this show? We have the one and only, the future president of the United States, Andrew M.F. Yang. Andrew, welcome back to the show.
Hello, nerds. It's a pleasure to be back. Man, I could be the nerd in chief potentially.
You are absolutely going to be the nerd in chief, and we're so thrilled to get time with you back now again. As a reminder to all of the audience, thank you to you all for helping contribute another $20K to the campaign.
Seriously, thank you.
Yeah, you're not going to have to do fundraisers anymore. We'll just keep doing these shows.
That would be a delight.
I bet you might be okay with that. Yeah. I wanted to divide this conversation into a few parts. The first one is I have some policy things. Then I have some kind of leadership stuff. And then I have some advice that we wanted to get from you to the Yang Gang. So let's start with the policy stuff. One of the topics that keeps coming up in a lot of the debates seems to be Medicare for all versus Obamacare plus, with the public option. And I was curious, when you see that, that sort of back and forth, what's going through your head? What's your position on this issue? And, do you think it's a distinction without a difference, or do you think it's an important debate to have?
It is an important debate, and it's going to be, as we all know, a difficult process because our healthcare system is so complex with so many moving parts. I'm in the Medicare for all camp with the provision that I would not get rid of private insurance. The goal is for the public plan to demonstrate to Americans that it's better than a private insurance plan and more cost effective. But getting rid of all private insurance strikes me as too disruptive a change. And I'm convinced that we need to go bigger than just expanding ACA because our healthcare system's fundamental dynamics are not making us stronger or healthier. They actually threaten to break our back over time. And though the ACA did some positive things to try and bend the cost curve, the reality is that the incentives in our healthcare system are still the same, which is they're built around maximizing revenue and profit and not necessarily our healthfulness. And the nerds, I think, will appreciate this story a great deal. I was just with Dean Kamen here in New Hampshire, and he invented the Segway. He invented a lot of stuff. He's like a modern day
Edison.
Yeah, I was going to say Edison. No, then I thought people would be like, maybe that's a little aggressive. The guy's like freaking spectacular. And so he came up with a portable dialysis machine that enables you to have treatment in the comfort of your own home, and it improves your quality of life dramatically, because right now you're going to an inpatient facility and plugging in, and you're there for a long time. It's debilitating. And so you'd think, well, people would be like, wow, fantastic, portable dialysis, let's do that. But then the health insurance companies and the device companies figured out they would make billions less if you had portable dialysis, because the inpatient dialysis centers are really expensive. And so what do? They lobbied to try and kill portable dialysis, even though the data is incredibly positive and the quality of life adjustments are real. And lo and behold, you know how much that costs us in additional monies every year? Tens of billions of dollars. Because the public ends up bearing that cost. And so this is the kind of mammoth inefficiency that we should all be angry about, because we all end up paying the price in different ways. And I'm convinced that something fundamental has to change in the healthcare system, where it's not built around maximizing activity and revenue. It's actually built around intelligent decisions that would improve our lives. And I believe that a strong public plan is the most direct route to get there, not having some option to the existing private insurance company plans that keeps the system's incentives more or less the same.
Let me dig into that example with the incumbents not really embracing this portable dialysis option, even though it was more efficient. If you harken back to, our days in studying economics in undergrad, the professor would say, well, what will happen is some company will offer this portable dialysis, and they'll say to the insurance company, hey, I have a way for you to provide the same treatment, and you'll pay out less and you'll keep more of the premium. And, the invisible hand will take care of this for us. Are you saying like, well, that's kind of not really what's happening? And why isn't that happening?
Oh, it's very much not happening. And there are a bunch of reasons why in the healthcare space, the invisible hand doesn't work so well. It's because you have a highly regulated market. You have certain players that are very powerful. We all know that lobbyists run the capital. Mm-hmm. And then on an individual level, we don't have perfect information. We're not all experts on every healthcare issue under the sun. The pricing is completely opaque. Like no one knows what the heck anything costs. Mm-hmm. If you're sick or your family members are sick, you become cost insensitive immediately. It's not like, oh, I'm dying. Like, oh, let me try and find a bargain. and there's this giant principal agent problem because a lot of the time you're not paying the bill. So if you're not going to pay the bill, you're like, well, I don't really care what this thing costs. It's for like the insurance company to figure it out, or more and more, it's for the public to figure it out. And so the invisible hand is very, very weak in the healthcare space for a whole panoply of reasons. And you can see it with the fact that now we have this entire thicket that's grown up where we're spending twice as much on our healthcare as other countries to worse results. And it's because a lot of the stuff we're spending tons of money on is not necessarily improving our quality of life. So yeah, like if there's any place where the invisible hand's not going to work, it would be healthcare is number one. I used to joke that healthcare is where good ideas go to die for this reason. Another place where the invisible hand does not work so well, education, actually, because the colleges just keep jacking up the prices, and then you just feel like you don't have a choice but to pay, and then the government gives you access to hundreds of billions of dollars in student loan debt. And so then you're like, oh, I guess I'm paying this now. And so the competitive pressures aren't there. And then the last one where the invisible hand's not working so well is housing, because you have a variety of NIMBYism regs that make it so that you can't, and I get it. Like I'm not for like getting rid of zoning regs, but I'm just pointing out that it's another highly inefficient market.
Yeah, so I guess the real world versus the beautiful XY charts that we looked at in Econ 101, sometimes they don't line up.
Yeah, I took Econ 101. I remember this.
Yeah, those are beautiful. They're very elegant.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's how prices go up, demand goes. And so, okay, makes a ton of sense. I could imagine if I were an old school dialysis company threatened by the portable one, and I had the opportunity to convince my congressman to introduce new rules that say, well, dialysis need to be performed in a official cement building with 3 floors.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
if you got billions of dollars at stake, you'd make any argument under the sun, And then if you're a congressperson, you're like, am I going to sign the protect like the Protect Dialysis Act?
Safe dialysis for America. Yeah,
it would be called like the Improved Dialysis Care Act, and then you're like, well, I guess I'll sign that.
Yeah, how can I vote against that?
And I'll take my check, please.
Yeah, that's right. That's a fun system we have in DC. Hopefully you will help kind of.
Oh man, I'm going to get in there, and then I'm going to do some things, and then there are going to be some people very unhappy about it, and I'll be like, well,
That's how you know. That's how you know you're doing a good job, man. If everybody's happy, then that's probably not a good sign. Infrastructure. So I know a lot of people talk to you about UBI, and of course that's super important. Infra, we don't talk about as much. And as someone who travels a lot internationally, I'm always struck by
how backward we are relative to other countries in terms of infrastructure. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I was curious, like within the big bucket of infrastructure, where do you think we need to kind of catch up the most? Is it transportation? Is it power? Is it communications? Like what do you think are the most important pieces of that puzzle?
Well, the first things are the structures that actually keep us safe every day in our commutes. I think the engineers gave us a D+ in infrastructure. A lot of it's decaying underneath our feet. And that's not just roads and bridges. That's also schools. Literally crumbling schools are a problem. So job number one is keep us safe. And I believe the infrastructure deficit we've built up is something like $4 trillion. Like the engineers give us a D+ and say, hey, it would cost about $4 trillion to upgrade us. Now, the wonderful thing about investing in infrastructure is you get that money back in efficiencies over time. Like if I manage to cut your commute by half an hour a day, and you do that for everyone in that metro area, and then you multiply that out, like, eventually you get those billions of dollars back. So that to me is number one, is things that keep us physically safe and you get high economic return. So that's roads, bridges. Transportation, I'm a big fan of too. I'm a train guy, and when you talk about when you go to other countries, you're like, how the heck are these trains like decades ahead of American trains? And then when you find an American train, I mean, we haven't really built up the usage rates or the traffic patterns to like make them make sense in the same way that they make sense in other countries. So that is a chicken or egg problem in the U.S. I will say I've seen in other parts of the world where you can go the equivalent of New York to D.C. in like an hour and a half, let's say. And then it gives rise to whole new communities because all of a sudden you can commute into downtown. Let's call it DC in this hypothetical, which is obviously very much a hypothetical. But if you commute into downtown DC in 45 minutes from, 60, 70, 80 miles away, then you end up with like a whole new community that develops. And then how do you measure that value? Like right now, that would go to the hands of developers and property owners. And it would in part pay for some of the transportation infrastructure that we could use. Communications, the biggest thing is that we need to create financial incentives to wire everyone on broadband, get it up to like 99.8% or 99.9%, because there's not a financial incentive for private companies to wire homes in rural areas right now. To the extent you have a broadband gap, it's always rural areas where they did the math and we're like, hey, it doesn't pay. And so the government has to say, look, we'll subsidize that, get the broadband penetration rate up to 99% plus, with the big caveat that sometimes politicians go around saying, if I can wire a rural area, then they'll all have the jobs of the future. And that's not really the way it works. If I get you broadband, it just means you can watch videos faster and stuff. But it doesn't mean you're going to all of a sudden become like the, next Bill Gates
Valley. Yeah.
But we should wire everyone as quickly as possible. And there's no reason that we can't put some resources in place to make that worth someone's while.
And as someone who's spent a lot of time in the last few years in Zurich, I love a great train. So I share your desire for a more efficient train system, or at least that as an option for more of us. And now I just drove this morning on the 101 in the Bay Area. That's a different experience.
Yeah, it's a zoo, man. I actually like if you're literally inventing the future, as so many people in Silicon Valley are, and then you get in your car and you're like, what is going on?
I mean, it's literally like for some people that work here in tech, like a quarter of their day is in a car, and that's like productive time lost. But yeah, hopefully we'll make some progress on there. Moving on, I had a question about the freedom dividend. So let's imagine you're president and you're meeting with McConnell. Let's just say the Senate still.
Sure.
And he says, hey, brother, I get that you feel like you have a mandate. I kind of agree with you. I know you've been campaigning on this freedom dividend forever. But, dude, 1,000 for the whole country in day one, that's too much. Let's roll this out slower. Let's do a pilot, like a beta test, Rhode Island, some little area. And then like work with us. Don't kind of like do this thing overnight. What would your reaction be?
Well, you have to govern effectively and just get as much done as you can in a given time frame. I will say that if I had a preference, it might be for some mixture of pilots where you could say, okay, concentrate on one region so that you can see the effects, but also let's do something broad throughout the population so that we can see if there are macro effects too. And I'd be most interested in that in part because this is going to be the greatest thing for Americans. I believe I will have a mandate because obviously I will have become president on the back of the freedom dividend. And I think if someone like Mitch McConnell's like, hey, I'm going to stand in the way, I would call his bluff because you know what? The folks in Kentucky will be like, wait a minute, like someone's getting a dividend and like Mitch is standing in the way. Like I'd be like, hey, Mitch, if you want to go to war with me on this, I'm happy to go to your people in Kentucky and be like, Mitch McConnell standing between you and a dividend. like, what's your office going to look like? So, so I would say two things. Number one, I'm a reasonable man, and I'm happy to have things happen in stages. But like, I'm certainly not open to essentially like kneecapping something in the guise of like, like pilots. And one of the ways that you can make sure that everyone feels the impact is to have something that goes out as broadly as possible, even if it's not $1,000 a month on day one. Because we are a big economy and a big society, there will be some adjustments. But I'm happy to go to war with someone who I can tell is just trying to like slow things down, not genuinely interested in solving the problem of getting info. And after I'm president, holy crap, is it going to be hard to stand in the way of the dividend? Because like if Mitch, like I will go to Kentucky and being like, hey guys, this would be a game changer for millions of you. And they'd be like, oh yeah, it would. Maybe not 100% of Kentuckians would be excited about it, but a lot of them would, like hundreds of thousands. And then you can imagine the scene outside of offices around the country. So yeah, that's about the shorthand. I'm a reasonable man, and I'm not like an all or nothing type. I think but I would be aggressive on this, and I believe I would win.
Awesome. I was talking a few weeks ago with Jessica Canaday, and then also the Yang Scream.
Lacey,
that's right. Lacey Delaney, I think. Yeah. And we were talking about, hey, Yang's really, in a way, he's a candidate for women because his proposal might have more impact on women than any other proposal being submitted by all other candidates. We also talked about whether we would see more of Evelyn on the trail. And there was a conversation around like, well, that kind of humanizes Andrew. It shows he's a family guy. And I was saying like, well, but who knows? Like maybe Evelyn doesn't want to be out there all the time. And I was curious, like, what's your view on her role in the campaign? And in general, what's the role of a first lady?
Well, there's a traditional role of the first lady, which I think is to take on various issues that are considered somewhat apolitical, like health, nutrition, and education, and then be like a messenger for that. For Evelyn, it's going to be built around her priorities as, a human being. And she has some priorities that I think Americans would be very excited about. Certainly special education and supporting families with kids or adults who are neurologically atypical would be one very core one. I'm happy to say that Evelyn is going to be campaigning more in the days to come, and that it might have already happened if not for the fact that impeachment just sucked up a lot of oxygen quickly, where there were some morning shows that were looking at having Evelyn on, and then post-impeachment, then that ended up being less compelling. But she's right now gearing up to be more public in terms of the campaign. Certainly not, she's not going to have my schedule or anything like that. It's a really interesting balance, because I'm thrilled that people like Jessica and Lacey see that this is a very pro-women campaign. I believe very strongly and deeply that it is. I think that having Evelyn as part of the campaign will make that clearer to more Americans. And I do think that the way we interpret information as a species would require that Evelyn actually help reinforce and hammer home that message, because the messenger matters, and we're conscious of that.
Yeah, totally. Well, we'll look forward to seeing more of Evelyn, and open invitation if she ever wants to hang out on the Nerds for Yang show. Like
that might be a really good avenue. I will talk to.
Yeah, she could do it from home. She doesn't have to travel.
She might really freaking dig it. I will talk to her about this.
Cool.
Yeah, that might be a really good opportunity.
All right, now next question. I know we have a limited amount of time. First of all, I'm going to preempt your answer. I know being apart from the family is the number one hardest part. So what is the second hardest part about running for president so far?
There's certainly a lot of adaptation that I've had to take on. So it's like a learning process. I mean, being apart from the family is definitely like 1A. I think like another thing that is sometimes hard is divorcing oneself from one's ideas. And I guess what I mean by this is like I'm very focused on the goals of the campaign. I believe we can win and we can advance our country and the species and everything else. And then let's say there's like a slight of some kind, like someone like says like, oh, like, you know, like Yang's plan won't work, or they omit me from a graphic, or whatever the heck the thing is, you know, and I'm a human being, so you're just like, what the heck is up with that? Like, but then you have to shift towards like, okay, I'm goal oriented, and like, you know, just don't take anything personally. I think I'm above average at that because, you know, like I'm fairly thick skinned and very goal oriented, and I see the vision very clearly. But I'd say one of the harder things about running for president is you know, just taking things in the most positive spirit when sometimes, you know, it actually like frustrates you.
Yeah. Well, let me just say on behalf of a lot of the Yang Gang out there, we empathize very much with that frustration, and we see it, and it definitely pisses me off. But on the positive side, every time I see that those kinds of slights or sort of I think are implicit bias to exclude you, I actually donate a little more, and I'm like, you know what?
I love that.
Screw these guys.
Means a lot.
It's BS, and everybody knows it, and we are, and I know you have to take the high road, and you're a good guy, you're a thick-skinned guy, you're focusing on the positive, but we also out there are kind of calling people to task, saying like, hey, can you explain why did you do this? And everyone should know that you know, this is a candidate that is being excluded, and I personally feel like if you looked like you came out of central casting, you may not be excluded as much. I know we'll never know what the root cause is, but it's not acceptable, and we are behind you 1,000% and appreciate
Thank you so much. I know it means a lot, and I will say, even I've been surprised and somewhat stunned by some of the biases from certain quarters of the press, where like it's been an education.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming positive intent, that it's not nefarious, that they're just really have subconscious biases about who they consider to be legitimate candidates. And hopefully over time, I was thinking the 10 million raise would like be like, hey, we've arrived, but maybe we need to hit 30 next quarter.
Yeah, there has to be something, or maybe we have to win some states. You know, like that. There's a combination of factors. But you know, one thing I'm excited about is I believe that there's going to come a time when it reverses or inverts. And I will say that when I spend time with journalists individually, I can almost see sometimes the light bulb going off when like, oh, they like understand. And so I do believe we can change the dynamic, and that it can go from where it is now to something very different.
I was at a school reunion with a bunch of friends just a few days ago, mostly kind of hardcore fiscal Republicans. And it was so awesome at a dinner where we were talking about the race, and we came, of course, I brought up you. And at the end of the dinner, they're like, you know what? Maybe the freedom dividend plus VAT is the only option to maintain, because they're all doing very well in life and they want a stable society that allows them to continue doing really well.
Yeah, me too.
And so I think but it took like a 2-3 hour dinner to kind of go through the nuance. But hopefully, you know, as time, yeah, I'm trying to get you one hedge fund manager at a time. Oh man,
that could be a slogan.
Yeah, put that on the bumper sticker. All right, I know. I think do we have like how much time do we have more? Like,
yeah, I'm enjoying it. Proceed.
Okay, 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, great. Could you talk a little bit about like the evolution of your leadership style? So I see there's this pre-Rogan phase. Then there's the Rogan to like the third debate, where by the third debate, I felt like you were like in the pocket. And then you had the, you know, of course, had the 10 million. Like, how do you think your leadership style will evolve from now to like Super Tuesday? Or do you feel like, you know, it's just more of the same kind of thing?
Well, I think the way you get looked at as a serious candidate is different than when you're the interesting figure. I don't want to lose what brought us here. I don't want to lose my humanity or sense of humor. But you understand that there are different threshold issues for candidates at a certain level. So that's going to require, again, like a bit of a process for me. I think my leadership style will be fairly constant because my organization and the campaign and people like you and wonderful supporters mean, you're making it happen every single day, and it's not like I'm like, peeking in, being like, hey, what you doing? like that's not happening. In many ways, my job is to try and make your job easier by being the best candidate I can be, and that changes over time given where the race is. People do ask me, it's like, hey, did you expect to be here? I honestly did. Like, I thought that we'd be here.
Mm-hmm.
The big question is whether we can take that next set of steps.
Yeah.
And then if you ask me, it's like, hey, did you project that you would take the next number of steps? I honestly did too. But like, I recognize the fact that that's not assured. And so, the fun thing about this is we're breaking new ground, and that's going to require me to evolve. I've evolved a lot over the last 2 years, and I think I can continue to evolve. I'm like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon.
Let me share with you an internal debate we have within some Yang Gang supporters around where we are and where we need to get to. So, yeah. So one line of thought is, hey, everything's going great. We don't want to peak too early. This is perfect. The stars are aligning. Like, just stay the course. And then there's another end of the continuum, which, to be transparent, where I'm on, which is like, everything is going great. We are beating lots of expectations and odds already, but like, we're not here just to be a credible candidate. We're here for the whole thing. And then I look at the polling data and I'm like, okay, well, these national numbers need to look more like 5 to 10 than 1 to 5. And at some point, if we were a business, we would time box this and say, we need to hit some milestone by December or whatever for us to feel, I don't want to bet on this like magical hockey stick on Super Tuesday.
I agree.
And so I was kind of curious, like, what's your take? Because I know a lot of people are like, hey, Tom, you're like such a hater. And I'm like, no, man, I like this guy, but we have charts,
I think it's very Yangian to have a clear-eyed view and look at it and being like, hey, like, I want good things, but they don't happen by themselves, and you have to try to make them happen. I'm more towards what you just described as your stance, which is, to win, we're going to need to show growth over the next 3.5 months in very dramatic ways. And then there's going to be some lightning in a bottle that strikes. But we have to, in many ways, make sure that there's all of the ingredients in place for when that lightning strikes, for like the fire to take off. And the fire is going to be much harder to take off if you're like in the 1 to 5% range in some of these places. So we have a lot of work to do. In a way, both of those things are true. Are things going great? Yes. Do we have a Herculean amount of work to do in a short period of time to win this thing? Yes. like both of those things are true.
Yeah.
And time is both on our side and not on our side. Like, it's on our side because we're growing, but it's not on our side because our growth curve needs to become steeper. Like, the derivative of the derivative needs to go up. And every passing day that the slope is not extreme enough is a day that we haven't used maximally. I mean, I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm here to win. And, we have to put everything in place to win. Now, I've sat with a team and we have a path to victory that I think is 100% realistic. But if the election were held today, like, we would not be there.
Yeah. Do you feel like we need to do more with kind of traditional primetime TV or traditional media to reach, older people or people who aren't as active on Twitter and YouTube? Or do you think it's more about the ground game? Like, where do you want to put your bets?
We have to reach people where they are. You can't try and invent the world as you think it should be, which is like, oh, like, people shouldn't be getting their news from TV. I mean, realistically, a lot of older voters get their news from TV. Mm-hmm. So we got to try and get on TV, and that involves both appearing on programs, but also buying some ads. And this is coming from someone who hates TV advertising. It just seems like you're setting money on fire. But the reality is that you're dealing with a lot of low information voters who use the TV as their primary information source. And TV ads are effective at the margins. You can see it with, some of the other campaigns. So we need to ramp up our fundraising, and then we need to use those fundraising on ground game, digital outreach, and yes, I hate to even say it out loud, Sun TV. You know, we're not going to try and I'm an operator. It's like you can outsmart certain things, but there's certain things you just have to freaking shrug and brute force. You know, it's like I think we can use our money more effectively than other campaigns, but in some cases we have to spend the money on expensive things that help move the needle.
Totally. Well, it sounds like a very reasonable, pragmatic approach, and that's why so many of us are excited about having someone in the White House that takes things from a pretty data-driven, kind of logical framework. I know
we can win, Yang Gang, but yeah, like we need to do more, truly.
Yeah, well, I kind of feel like we're investing in a startup, and if you want to win market share and be number one, you're going to have to put some money into it. And so hopefully the fourth quarter numbers will be super exciting. And I know if everybody just gave 3 times more than they gave last time, you'd get 30 million, right?
Yeah, that's true. Plus there'd be some growth because we get new sometimes too.
So let's just do that.
That's just the math, team. I'll tell you what, you guys raise 20 grand on the regular. I'll just come back and have this conversation over and over again. It'd be freaking awesome. This would be like the new meets. That would be a delight.
So will that continue after you get to the White House?
Probably not.
Dude, I love the honesty. But
we would do something else fun. Like you'd all come to the White House and we'd have some fun together.
Yeah. Maybe we do like a once a year thing. How about once a year when you're in the White House?
Sure.
20 minutes.
That's reasonable.
A nerd's conversation, you know? All right. So last question I have for you, Andrew, is what is the biggest misconception you think the Yang Gang has about you or the campaign, and what message do you have for them as a final for this interview?
Wow. I feel like the Yang Gang knows me so well. What do you think about me that's wrong? What's like a deep, dark secret? You know, I'll say this. I think the Yang Gang may not realize that, I think I come across as like a highly, highly self-disciplined type, and like even when I'm in this conversation, I'm like a little slicked up and tricked out. I think the thing the Yang Gang might not know about me is that if you're leaving me to my own devices, I'm very much like a sweatshirt and t-shirt like guy who's like just kicking around, and I'm fairly normal in that regard. I have a feeling that would be a surprise to a lot of people, but like I'm like a jeans and like sloppy t-shirt type most of the time. Not that you can tell.
So blazer and blue shirt is as formal as you typically will get.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. Though, you know, another misconception about me and the Yang Gang is that I'm somehow super averse to wearing a tie. Like I'll wear a tie if it serves a function. So, you know, fear not when I meet with some very stuck up foreign leader, I'm very happy to put on a tie. It's fine.
Awesome. I'm not surprised that some people are worked up about it, especially when the news anchors kept kind of griping on it forever.
Yeah, just know that I'm reasonable on that stuff too. I'm like pretty flexible. I'm sorry. I'll think about whether I have a deeper, darker secret from the
for next time. Yeah.
Pretty well. Like for the American public, it would be a different set of answers. But you all, I feel like you get it.
It's funny, if you wore a tie in the tech industry, people would be concerned about you. Like, who is this guy?
They'd trust me much less. They'd be like, who's this?
Did the real estate agent come to renew the lease?
Totally. I'd be like,
that's right.
Your rent by 2% this year.
Yeah. Any advice for the Yang Gang to wrap up? Like, what can we do to be more helpful to you?
You guys are tremendous. I love you for it. We have an incredible opportunity in front of us. But my advice would be to take your vision of the startup, where we have to put real resources to work to gain market share, to heart. You know, like that. This is a human-driven campaign, but we need to have resources to play with the big boys, and so that's where our focus will be. We have magic, but we also need to do the blocking and tackling, and that's just going to require a lot of money in many cases. So if we have a level playing field where we have the same level of resources as other campaigns, we will win hands down. Oh, yeah. But if we are operating at a fraction of their resources, we may not win.
Yeah.
So that's really it. We've got like the unfun stuff of like the putting the shoulder to the grindstone and saying like, hey, hedge fund manager X or like friend X, it's like, hey, you do this. You know, I know that stuff is not always a good time, but that's how we're going to make history.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited. I feel like we've got the right quarterback in you, and you've built a great team around you. And I'm ready to invest in CenturyLink Stadium and build the infrastructure around you.
Yeah, fill that stadium, and then
you'll be the Russell Wilson of the White House, man. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, the White House. So if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, big rally on the 27th. Hopefully I will see you in person then. Nevada on Friday, but a lot of fun stuff. And then Iowa, like Rivers Cuomo concert, November 1 in Iowa. So we have a lot of fun things going on around the country. If you're watching this and near any of those places, please come on out, and hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Andrew. And thanks again to the Nerds for Yang Nation for raising the money.
Nerds, I love you.
Nerd power, baby.
Oh, nerds for the next time. And thank you. You guys are the best. This is a lot of fun. This is like my favorite type of combo.
I love it, man. Keep it real, brother.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. He's the one I'm endorsing. His style is awesome. Taking donations, whatever size the portion. If not, volunteer your time instead. Grassroots won't stop at the polls till he's ahead. Some say, who is that? Hey, yo, the newest cat. Other candidates go home feeling super whack. Yeah, they all done. Humanity first, that's the slogan. 2020, here we come. Drop your ballot at the booth just to prove he makes moves. And guess what? Everybody gets $1,000. Studies show it's bound to help economy, making sure we all eat, not just the wealthy. Now I must confess, the country's a mess. God bless us all, it's all just a test. Why not nominate the king of debates? Yeah, it's true with the crew winning both state to state. Each term 4 years, careful who you get stuck with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Not many politicians can really be trusted. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Yeah.